Okay, so this presentation will be recorded and it will be available, everybody that registered it will be available to, and I believe I'm not quite sure what the Culpeper County office is going to do yet. It will either be on our website available, or we haven't quite decided. So, but definitely y'all have all registered, so it will be available to you. The slides of the presentation will also be available. And I don't have a lot of handouts, but I will also email y'all some handouts that work very well along with this presentation. So a lot of y'all have been hearing my voice currently, and since some of y'all joined on, a lot of y'all have not heard me say my name yet. So we are going to be talking about edible landscaping today. This is an introductory class, and mostly we'll be focusing on a little bit of design, a little bit of how permaculture principles can be interwoven into your landscape, depending on how far you want to go, or how far you want to dive into those principles. And then towards the end of the presentation, we will be talking about fruits that do not need a ton of spraying or pesticide treatments in our area. So native fruits listed we will talk about, and then also a few non-natives, which are not invasive as far as I know. It's always a possibility. Every day is a learning experience, so you always find out something new. But I am Ashley Appling. I am the Horticulture Extension Agent in the Culpeper County office. And as you can see on the screen, I also serve Madison and Orange counties. So I serve a 3-county area. I am also the Master Gardener Coordinator for the Rapidan River Master Gardeners, which cover Culpeper, Greene County, Madison County, and Orange County. So we cover all those areas with our Master Gardeners as well. But we have about 184 people. You never know with registrations. A lot of folks register and then forget. But I wanted to cover all our bases just in case all 500 of y'all did attend today. So like I said earlier, there will be an live encore presentation of this class tomorrow at 5 o'clock, Friday, May 8th. Same length and everything. So it will be available tomorrow. So let's get going. Okay, so why edible landscaping? As you can see, as you could imagine, it does offer an alternative to conventional landscaping. So what do I mean by conventional landscaping? So this is the landscaping that maybe you're buying into a new neighborhood. It's the few shrubs in the front border by the windows. Maybe that single tree in the front yard. Kind of sad looking tree sometimes. But then you have a few shrubs, no edibles in sight. Maybe some knockout roses. That seems pretty common. Up in Northern Virginia, towards the Washington, D.C., Potomac River area, maybe loropetalums will be used. I'm from Georgia, and that's what they throw in there. They throw loropetalums, knockout roses, and a few other staples, maybe some boxwood, maybe some holly thrown in there. Not a lot of edible plants in sight. So you can interweave, that's what we'll be talking about in this class. You can interweave the edibles, and a lot of these edibles, as we will see in the pictures coming up, are very attractive in their own right too. So they will not, you can interweave it very nice and have a very nice landscape as a result. And just like I said, all kinds of fruits, nut trees, interestingly enough. And there's some shrubs. You could try hazelnuts. Hazelnuts can grow in our area. And the black walnut, which some people curse and some people like. That is a very, very much native nut that you can grow in our area also. So we'll have a few other examples coming up. Berry bushes can be interwoven. Vegetables, they don't have to be put off into their own little area of the garden. You can put tomatoes interwoven into your shrub border. You could put herbs are very easily to interweave into your shrub borders or your perennial gardens. And we'll talk about a few examples of those also. Edible flowers, yeah, that's great, especially if you've grown them yourself or you've waited a certain amount, or you know the grower specifically. If you know where they came from, it's very nice edible flowers. Nasturtium, very nice flower. You can start from seed very readily. And the leaves actually have a peppery taste. You can eat the flowers also. So edible flowers. Uh, the classic pansy of fall, of course. Uh, Completely edible, nice in salads. Uh, and along with those ornamental plants, still using ornamental plants, still using flowering plants, shrubs and trees. You can interweave all of this to make a very nice landscape. Some other aspects. Why do we garden in the first place? It doesn't have to just do with edibles. You have a mental health improvement. You have a joy and interest of seeing things grow. That's always very important. Aesthetics from plants, whether they're ornamentals or they're edible plants. Just being able to look out your window. They've done all kinds of research, especially Washington State University. A lot of research into uh, improvement in hospital situations just by being able to see the plants outside the patient's window, or maybe a house plant in the corner. A lot of mental health improvement, especially in our current situation. Tons of folks currently gardening. We are getting tons of questions into our Culpeper County office, as I am sure the other Virginia Cooperative Extension offices are. So it can help. You have a goal. Some people need a goal. You have a goal. Gardening can help with that. There's always the artistic part of gardening, the design part, making things look nice. That works for other types of people. So it's mental health all around. And then the accomplishment, especially if you're vegetable or fruit gardening, the accomplishment of growing and harvesting your own food can be very, very, very mentally helpful. And yeah, all kinds of different goals like that. You can involve individuals, your family. Maybe not right now because of social distancing, but in the future, you can involve your neighborhood. You can involve all kinds of aspects. The community can be really enriched with these kind of gardening situations. Just good overall. So a few examples of not quite the same, but pretty nice alternatives. So there's nothing wrong with a Japanese maple, nothing wrong at all. It looks very nice in a shrub border on its own. But as you all know, or as I'm believing that you'll know, you can't really eat anything off a Japanese maple. So there are very nice alternatives. Maybe you love that maroon, dark purple color to the leaves. Uh, black elderberry, very nice alternative. Grows a lot faster and bigger, so you have to worry about that. But it gives you the same color look. So just examples of alternatives. Nothing wrong with the Japanese maple. I love Japanese maples, but it's always nice to have alternatives when you're gardening. So a few other examples. Burning bush, this is actually a non-native that's not good to have in your landscape. But look at the picture on your right-hand side. Beautiful. Blueberries are beautiful shrubs in the fall. And you can see in these pictures right here, the color, I would say the blueberry looks better, but the blueberry just, it sticks up there. It stays. It's nice fall foliage color. And you get the nice fruit production, and you don't get the invasiveness as you get as from the euonymus, the burning bush. And then you have, I don't have pictures of it, but you have different kinds of trees that have alternative. Actually, I do. I'm getting ahead of myself. But you have all the alternatives, like we have here. Sugar maple, nothing wrong with the sugar maple, but we're talking about edible landscaping plants. American persimmon maybe doesn't get as wide, as I'm sure some of y'all know, but it does get really tall, can be a good alternative. Fruit's not always the greatest to eat. You have to allow it to fully ripen. It has an astringent quality to it if you don't let it fully ripen. and makes your mouth all hairy and just nasty if it's not fully ripened. But American persimmon, as you can see from the fall foliage color, pretty nice. Asian persimmon or American persimmon, beautiful fall foliage color, both trees. Asian persimmon is actually a little bit nicer, even though it's non-native, a little bit nicer in our contemporary landscapes. It's a smaller tree. And we'll talk about that coming up in our profiles pages, slides, I mean. But yeah, look at that. American persimmon, Asian persimmon, beautiful. And you have edible quality at the same time. These aren't too, these are both fruiting plants that are really nice in your landscape. But these are just interesting foliage, excitement, the tropical look. A lot of folks like interweaving a tropical look into their landscapes. Both of these are deciduous trees. So we have our pawpaw on the left-hand side. That is a native fruit. If you go hiking in the woods in our area, you will very readily see the pawpaw tree. If you grow it in a full sun location, as we're seeing here, you can grow from seed. The cultivars are a little bit better quality, but you can see the leaves look very, very tropical. Look at those leaves, they're huge. It looks very, very nice. And the fig, or the fig bush, some people only know it as a fig Newton, but you can actually eat the real fig fruits. And fig is a great alternative. Depends on where you are in Virginia, though. If you get up into the mountains, you get into zone 6, zone 6A, 6B, zone 5. Depending on where you're at, fig probably won't do too good. It's going to freeze in the winter. But around anywhere in zone 7, especially up towards the DC metro area, you'll be fine. Figs are great. I live down here in Orange County. That's where I'm broadcasting from right now. And the best fig I have found that grows well for me is the cultivar called Chicago Hardy. So it can be frozen to the ground. That's one of the traits of this cultivar. And it comes up nicely the next year and actually produces fruit from that year's growth. So Chicago Hardy, if you haven't had luck with figs in the past, that is a nice cultivar. And look at that. Nothing eats it. No deer don't eat it. If you want a plant that's no spray, no deer, fig is pretty nice. So a little bit about landscaping, a little bit about design. So what are your objectives? What kinds of fruits? What kinds of nuts? Do you want fruits and nuts at the same time? Do you want vegetables? Do you want herbs? Is it only going to be for your own use, your family's use, or are you going to do it for wildlife primarily? Either way, even if you did plan it for family use, more than likely the wildlife's going to get their share. But these are always thoughts. These are little thought experiments. What do you want? What do you want from the garden? And then not just growing things for growing things, just for the sake of it. Do you actually like what you're growing? What kind of fruits and nuts do you enjoy? Contacting your local extension office, contacting me if you want to. Some fruits are easier to grow than others. We'll be talking about mostly easy fruits in the landscape. Apples, peaches, it's going to be hard. Plums, it's going to be hard to grow in your landscape. So I don't really like spraying. I don't spray my vegetable garden, and I don't like spraying fruit trees. So I don't really grow apples and peaches because of that. But it's all up to you. I'm not saying anything bad about them. They're great fruits. If you really want to dedicate the time, you can do it. Other things to keep in mind: space. How much do you have in general? Do you have 1/3 of an acre? Do you have 1/4 acre? Do you have just a little strip in the front yard because you're in a townhouse? How big of an area do you actually have? So we'll talk about sizes, how big some of the plants get later on our profiles. Horizontal as well as vertical space. So that's very important. A lot of folks just plant that hedgerow of shrubs. But always keep in mind, you could put in a trellis, you could grow vertically, you could grow table grapes, different table grape varieties. Um, Hardy kiwi, if you don't know what that looks like, I'll have some pictures coming up later. Hardy kiwi grows in our area. It's not the kiwi you find in the grocery store, but if you cut it open, looks the same color, and it's actually easier to eat. You can eat it just like a grape, and you don't have to peel hardy kiwi. And that's what they're called, actually. They are called hardy kiwi if you look them up. And they grow gangbusters. They grow maybe a little bit faster than grapes. We had a farmer in Madison, Virginia. I don't remember how long ago. It was pretty long ago, I think, maybe 10, 15 years. He had a hardy kiwi farm going, and those plants grew so fast that he just gave up. He couldn't keep it going with it because they had such vigor. But you have that vertical space to keep in mind when you're thinking about your different designs. Combining all the different aspects, combining tall trees, understory trees under the tall trees, shrubs into the design, herbaceous plants, a lot of different edible herbaceous types plants. And then vines, we'll have some profiles of some vines. Not very many that are edible, but we'll have a few. Maypop is a very fun one if you have kids or grandkids. The fruit actually literally pops, so it's a very fun thing to grow. And I'll have that picture coming up also if you don't know what that is. Just a quick example. So you have your tall tree here, you have your canopy tree. Maybe this is your large fruit tree. This is your nut tree. Maybe this is a black walnut. English walnut doesn't grow too great here, but you can do it sometimes. Pecan, people forget about those. We can grow those in our area. Then you have the tall tree, you have the nut trees here. And then you have some lower, shorter growing fruit trees. You have your herbaceous layer. You have your vine that you're keeping on top of. You're not letting it grow aggressively out of control. Then you have some other examples. You have your herbaceous layers, root crops, your vegetable crops thrown in around the area. And as you can see from this slide description, this is like the classic permaculture design. So you have all this interwoven, and that's you can make it look nice. It doesn't have to be put to the back 40, put to the back corner of the yard where no one wants to look at it. It can look very, very nice. Other ideas. Time is very important. Some fruits produce the same season. In general, strawberries, classic example of herbaceous plant everyone's familiar with. That will grow and produce the same season that you plant them. Other examples, blueberries will generally, depending on the plant you buy, but it's recommended that you don't harvest the fruit that first year. But most plants, as you can tell, patience is always the virtue, as they say. Most plants will take 2 to 3 years or maybe even a decade. So some fruits and nut trees take a very long time to produce. So how much time do you have? That's really important. And then diversity, that's like the classic permaculture ideas. If you want to graze, you want to dive into that. Select plants that produce at different times of the year. So you don't have all your fruit. You don't have all your fruit in May. You don't have all your fruit in July, and you have nothing else the rest of the year. You want to stagger the different production times. And we'll talk about a few select plants coming up. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But diversity. You don't have just all apple trees. You don't have just all pawpaw trees. The pest comes in that really loves that particular fruit, or disease comes in and wipes it out. Basically, you have no production that year. So diversity, that's key. You want multiple types, different types of fruiting plants, different types of nut crops if you can, if you have space for them. So we always have to talk about the right plant for the right place. So I have the USDA plant hardiness zone map on the next slide coming up. So if you're not familiar with that, you will be after this presentation. Uh, is the plant adaptable to local soil conditions? So basically, very basically, does it like our acidic soils? Does it like more basic soils? So pH, in a very simple definition. Uh, neutral, of course, is pH of 7. That is if you went to the store, bought a 1-gallon jug of distilled water, you put your test probe in there, it will read about 7, sometimes it fluctuates, 7.2, sometimes 6.8, but it will be 7. There's nothing in that water, no minerals, nothing, because it was boiled off, collected, and it's still, and that's what you have. If you're below 7, you're acidic. You're above 7, you are basic. So most of our soils in our area, uh, depending on the history, 5, 6, maybe low 6s. You might be below 5, 6, but that is the general range of our soil conditions. And most of the crops you can grow pretty successfully in our soils. We always get that classic question of how do you grow in this clay? So people are always asking that question. And our clay is actually really good soil. It doesn't like being really wet, soggy. If we get a lot of rain, it gets kind of ick. But it actually has a lot of minerals. We don't have to really worry about, usually if the pH is correct for that growing condition for that plant, you usually don't have to worry about micronutrients. But to figure out exactly what you got there, you can always go to the local extension office, depending on the county you're in, and you can get a soil test kit, a soil test box from the extension office. And Virginia Tech is still currently testing soils. So you can send it off, mail it off to Virginia Tech, and you'll get your report telling you if you need to fertilize, if you need to put lime down, which raises the pH. Maybe if you're growing blueberries, you might have to lower the pH. So that soil test will let you know. So what kind of sunlight, what kind of water do you have available on the site? Do you have full sun? And full sun does not mean 4 hours of light. Full sun is at least 6, 8+ hours of direct sunlight on that spot. So if you cannot grow a tomato plant in that spot, that means you do not have full sunlight. So some of the plants we'll talk about need a lot of sunlight. You can actually grow blueberries and pawpaws, just as 2 examples, in shade, but production's just decreased. I actually have some dwarf blueberries in my yard, and they are in the shade. They don't grow very fast, but they look nice. And as I just said, I actually don't get very many blueberries off of it because they are in the shade. But you can grow them there. Plant grows there. If you have a lot of disease pressures in your area, maybe you've talked to your neighbors, maybe you've read in extension publications and you know about the diseases in your area, or you know about the insects in your area, you can try to find cultivars that are resistant to those diseases and insects. Longevity of the plantings, strawberries, maybe a couple of years and you're starting over. A lot of our fruiting plants, our nut trees, are going to be there for decades plus. So just keep that in mind. They will be there a long time. Just drifting into vegetables a little bit. Asparagus, that is a vegetable. That is going to be in place 20-something years plus. Yes, I muted myself on accident. Sorry, y'all. Yeah, just how much time do you have? How much time are you willing to wait? Yeah, particular crop. Muting myself did not help with my progression. But yeah, I think y'all get the idea on this. So this is actually from one of our Virginia Tech publications. This is on the very front page, actually, of the small fruits in the home garden. So just a quick cartoonish looking example. So you have So you have some ornamentals. You have some Japanese spireas, which are both ornamentals. They'll be blooming in a couple of weeks. Then you have a blackberry next to the front porch. Yeah, that's a great idea. That's going to do your vertical area of thought, landscaping area. You have a blackberry actually on either side of the, you have some symmetry going a little bit on either side of the little driveway. You have the Japanese maple, some junipers, in the herbaceous layer you actually have some strawberries here. And then you have some azaleas intermixed with blueberries, which both like acidic soils. So very basic, but it works. You have ornamentals interwoven with fruiting plants. So here is our plant hardness zone map for Virginia. It says 2005 on there, but we are still currently in zone 7. So that has not changed. So this is my area right here that I work in, Culpeper, Madison, Orange counties. And as you can see, we are firmly in zone 7A. So that means the annual extreme minimum temperature for zone 7A is about 5 degrees Fahrenheit in the wintertime. So that's what you keep in mind when you're selecting fruiting plants. You want fruiting plants that can survive those temperatures. And most of the plants we're going to talk about today and most that you'll find will do fine in these areas. Depending on where you're at, you're closer to the Chesapeake Bay, you see your zone 7B, maybe even 8A. A little bit closer along the Potomac, you're getting in the 7B, maybe 8, depending on where you're at, your little microclimate area. But the majority of our area, unless you go towards the valley, where you're going to be zone 6A, 6B, into the 5s. Most of our area right here that I'm talking about and where I work are firmly in 7A. So maybe you found your perfect plant, you found the growing conditions to be right, you found everything's all good. So just keeping in mind a little bit other design tips. So scale. Scale is the relative size of plants to each other and to other objects. So quick example, set size of a human, a house, trees, other existing features. You don't want to plant that humongous tree in the tiny yard in front of the little house. So the classic example of that is the Colorado blue spruce. Someone maybe got it as a Christmas tree, a little tiny cute little tree that you found at the nursery around Christmas time. They plant it in the front yard, then it grows humongous and looks kind of goofy in front of the little ranch house. So that is totally out of scale with that situation. You'd probably be better off with something around 25 foot tall, maybe a dogwood tree, one of the fruit trees we're going to talk about today. Yeah, that would work nice, but not the tree that's going to grow 50 foot tall or anything like that. Very much out of scale. So keeping scale in mind, very good design basics. So rhythm. What is rhythm? Rhythm is the repetition of the visual pattern. So that's what we're using this for right now, currently. So patterns. You want visual harmonies, the accents come into play. So harmony unifies the scene, usually imbues a sense of calm to the situation. So this is long hedge of the same plant. Very calming as you can see, as you can think of, because you're not actually looking at anything. Or a huge stretch of lawn, nothing in the lawn. That's very calming. But to the extreme, as you can see on my slide, becomes boring. So you don't want too much harmony. And that's where the visual accents come in. That emphasizes contrast. So that's a sense of a plant or an object grabbing your attention. We got more people trying to join, so here we go. So they break up the visual harmony. So you have that neat trimmed hedge. Maybe you have something to break it up. So you have, we're going to talk about, maybe you have a boxwood hedge. We're going to talk about Nanking cherries coming up. Nice shrub type cherry bush. That would be a nice contrast, bright red fruits in the middle of that hedge, or maybe not just one, at least 3. Of course, you want to design in odd numbers. So 1 would be a classic accent. So you have one very, very nice plant. 3s are usually nice. 5s, you want to keep everything in odd situations. If you have even numbers, there's just something about our minds which makes us want to figure out why it's in even numbers. So that's why odd numbers are always suggested usually in design. So form comes into play also. So this gives you a sense of place. So this is the upright plant that I was just talking about that catches the accent. Rounded or spreading plants can create sense of harmony also. Lines, they enclose spaces and they also carry your eye along the scene. So they're usually most commonly paths, or you have that straight line hedge. You have those hedges in front of the house, getting everybody to know where, locating their eyes to go to the front door. If I don't get tongue-tied. So you have the lines, straight lines, curvy lines slow down, kind of makes it more comfortable pace to the walking. If you have curved walkways, you have curved paths. As it says on this slide, straight lines carry you very quickly. Curvy lines invite you to take your time to the place. And then color comes into play in this too. It can affect contrasting, harmonizing. Very, very bright colors are usually very popular in the garden center now. Bright flower colors, bright leaf color, texture, foliage. And that's because most of us are driving about 45, 50 miles an hour, and we can only see the bright colors because we're not slowing down. So you can put the blues in there. You can develop different kinds of contrasting. And color is fun to play with, but you don't want to go over too much, or people start getting a little nervous twitch when they come to your house. But color can be very nicely interwoven into this design. As we showed in the pictures earlier, we have the maroons, we have the dark reds, the elderberry can break up your green tendency in the garden. It's very nice design. So a little bit about permaculture. Permaculture, basically, we've been talking on the fringe of permaculture in this early part of the class. So this is the conscious design and maintenance agricultural system to provide diversity, stability, and resilience in the ecosystem. So to a degree, depending on how far you involve this system, permaculture resembles nature, but it is based on the natural cycles and your local ecosystem. So you're not trying to put the square peg in the round hole, as the example always goes. So you're working with what you got on your site, basically. So observing and interacting is very important. So maybe taking the time to design, considering the different seasons. So we mentioned that a little bit earlier. You don't want all the fruit in the same time of year. You want keeping an eye on the times of the day. So where does the sun hit? Where does it land at different times of the day, depending on if you have shade, if you don't have shade. The lay of the land, is your property all flat? Or does it have gentle hills? Does it have a steep hill? Does it have wet areas where the water really collects? So keeping in mind all your different little situations going on. And what's currently there. So maybe a lot of people buy houses and there's already a landscape in place. So what's currently there? What structures can be seamlessly used to implement what you want to do, what your design is? So a lot of this is just looking and interacting with the environment that you have there. So understanding positive and negative feedbacks in nature. So a very, very negative one would be the deer are just trying to make a living, but maybe you have a whole deer herd that goes through your yard. And maybe you have to stay away from plants that they really like. Or you have a lot of Japanese beetles. I know when I first moved into my house, I was inundated with Japanese beetles and deer. so, and basically now I have the only plants I have still out in the front yard area, and the only plants I have in the back are plants that the deer don't really like and the Japanese beetles don't really like. So I don't have a lot of roses. I only have one rose because they devastated the roses. So knowing what you got there, what the positive and negative feedbacks in your local area. Designing the systems to be self-regulating, that is really diving into permaculture. So this even incorporates animals. So you have chickens on the property. You have, we're going to talk about composting, a very quick overview of composting. So very much designed. You can really dive into permaculture and get very deep. So this is just a quick overview of what permaculture is. So just different examples. This is always the classic one. This is the Three Sisters example if you want to go into vegetable examples, as we're doing here. So you have the beans, you have or peas or clover, can help with nitrogen fixation. So the bottom left-hand picture, you have the squashes. It's usually a winter squash, maybe an acorn squash or butternut squash going around the center of the corn. And the beans are using the corn as a support. That's the vertical structure in your vegetable garden design. But this is, if you're going into permaculture, this is what you're going to be using. You're going to be using the legumes to help fix the nitrogen, as this slide says. So just some examples. So the interactions, we're talking about the horizontal interactions. We're talking about the vertical interactions. Growing tall growing sun-loving plants with shade-growing plants. So you have the tall cucumbers. Maybe you have the tall tomato plants. You can actually stretch in the summertime. You can stretch your lettuce production by growing lettuce in the shady area behind those cucumbers, behind those tomatoes. So using everything you have on hand is very important. And they can also help to a degree with pest control. So diversity by diversity is very important. So the corn, the classic example. So the corn companion plant or the squash and pumpkins. There's not the hard, fast research, of course, but there's interactions that have been seen. It helps to disorient the squash vine borers, protecting, and the vine crop also protects from the little critters, from the voles, the little mice critters that might come up and eat your corn. So trap crops, that really goes into vegetable gardening, but using trap crops. So using a plant that the pests like more than the plant you want to grow. So trap crops come into play. You could dive into this. This could be its whole other different presentation, but this is just a quick examples. Yep, quick, this is for your info. I probably should take that one out in the future since we already talked about it. So producing no waste, looking for ways to make waste a useful input rather than just an output. So recycling, composting the stuff on your site, reducing the waste as possible and over time. So these are all classic permaculture principles here. So we got folks joining, we got folks doing all kinds of stuff. So quick overview of composting. So you could add the classic example of the 3 bins, as you can see in the upper left-hand picture. So different areas. You have the new compost, which breaks down a little bit. You move it to the 3rd bin to help it break down a little bit more. And then the last bin is where your good stuff is. That's the stuff you're going to be adding to the garden. So you could have just a pile. You could have a plastic barrel, plastic composting bins. So these are just the few quick examples. In Virginia Cooperative Extension, we have a whole publication. That's where these pictures come from about composting. So the classic equations. So you have your brown parts, which are your carbons. So this would be the brown material. This would be like the mulches, the pine straw that might be out there, the foliage that's broken down a little bit more, so it is now considered brown. So you add that to your compost bin. The green part, classic example, grass clippings, definitely be the green part. That's probably the easiest example that comes to mind. The newly fallen leaves. We're not really talking about kitchen stuff as much. Most home compost piles don't get really hot enough to fully sterilize themselves. But you can still make a pretty good compost. I would just stay away from the kitchen probably if you're doing the backyard one, unless you got a really nice compost pile going. But that's why you always flip the compost. You're turning over the materials. That is introducing the oxygen in our picture here. And then watering your compost. If you don't get enough rainwater, water is important for making compost. And the microorganisms, they're pretty much there. You don't have to worry too much. But this is just a quick example. This is what goes into making a nice compost. Another way of visualizing it. So you have your bin, the food waste. I'd be a little bit careful. That's just me. That's the disclaimer for today. But you have your water, you have your grass clippings, of course, green example, you have your brown materials, manure, of course, but there's restrictions, especially if you're using it in the vegetable areas. But this is another way of visualizing it. I'm a visual learner, and I like seeing these kind of things too. Just a quick science thrown in here. So to kill most pathogens and weed seeds, as you can see on the far left-hand side of this graph, you actually have to have your compost pile hit a temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 5 days. As you can imagine, wow, 3 to 5 days, 140 degrees Fahrenheit to kill most pathogens and weed seeds. And I won't say it's not a general thing, but a lot of backyard compost piles are not hitting that temperature. So as you can see, or as you can imagine, you're probably not killing most pathogens and weed seeds unless it's getting to that temperature. But this is just for your information. This is what it has to get to kill most pathogens and weed seeds. The blue line is the outside air temperature, and the red line is actually the temperature in the pile. That's why some of the commercial piles will catch on fire, even if you've read stories about that in the news or seen it on TV shows. It's very hot, as you can imagine, as you can see from this graph. Another quick way of growing vegetables, especially hugelkultur is a fun word to say. In addition, Washington State University has a great publication about hugelkultur. Our Rapidan River Master Gardeners actually have a couple hugelkultur bed demonstrations at our vegetable demonstration plot in Culpeper County. And this flyer right here, this is for y'all's information. Basically, you use old, or it doesn't have to be old ones. You could use newer logs too. But any kind of wooden debris you put in the middle of the pile. Then you put soil on top of the logs, the twigs, the branches, and then you plant into that soil that's on top of the wood. So as the wood breaks down over time, you're making compost in this pile, in this hugelkultur bed. So our first year at our demonstration garden, they planted beans into the garden in the first year. And then the next year we planted some cole crops, some cabbages, and some other types of crops. I think they did try Brussels sprouts on it, but it didn't really work. But as you go on season after season, you'll get a nice, very nice, and this also stretches into, this gives you vertical growing space also. Very good idea if you don't have a lot of area in your garden. Wonderful, I love this idea, and it's fun to say too, hugelkultur. And this pamphlet, you can find it online on their website, Washington State University's website, and they take you through the steps of constructing your hugelkultur bed. So other examples, integrating rather than segregating. So we've talked about that a lot. And this is basically what you came for today. We're talking about diversity, resilience to problems, increases the disease. You don't have as much disease pressures. You don't have much insect problems. You don't have the chance of losing your entire crop to crop failure. Monocultures, if you only have apples, maybe you won't have apples that year if you have a bad disease pressure. We have a lot of rain. We don't have a lot of, I remember, I think it might be 4 or 5 years ago now, but we had like a wet summer. I remember that summer. And it was a terrible fig year because it would rain so much, we didn't have enough sunlight to really produce the figs. So bad year for figs. If you only had figs, you were sad that year. You had a crop failure, basically. But monocultures, you want a little bit of everything. If you don't take anything else in this presentation today, diversity is very, very important. Just a couple examples here. Won't go over them too deep. The beneficial habitats, of course. Making habitats that predators like to live in. So the ladybird beetles, lacewings, hoverflies, the praying mantis, other types of predators, spiders, and predatory mites. These all help you fend off the bad guys, as you can say, in the garden. A little bit of differences. I liked this this example. So organic gardening versus permaculture. So you can see permaculture goes a little bit deeper. Garden to nurture. So you're deflecting the wind, you're giving shade, you're filtering the air. Just a different way of thinking. So it is different. That's a big takeaway from this. Okay, so if you hadn't already guessed, this class actually goes till 6:30. So we are getting into the fruits now. And I don't think if I mentioned that today, but the flyer did say 5 to 6:30. So we are good. There's no emergency situation going on right now. But recommended fruiting plants. So let's get going. So one example, a Native American plant, as you can see from the name, American plum. So you have a picture of the flower. It does have a tendency of growing as more of a shrub. So that can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. If you want it in a shrub border, it's absolutely fantastic. It looks very nice. Little fruits, little plums right here. Make sure I didn't mute myself. So it is a suckering shrub. Just to give you some idea of how big it can get, you can prune it. But ultimately unpruned, it would be 15 feet tall and 25 foot wide. Those white flowers we saw in the previous pictures, depending on temperatures this year, in our spring, it would have probably been a little bit earlier, but sometime in March is when you'll see it in flower. Round red plums, we saw the green ones in that picture. They're about 1 inch in diameter. Bright yellow pulp. One of the bad things is that the seed is really big. So you don't have a lot of pulp, but it is a very good fruit for preserves and jellies. So it does work very, very nice to that. And it's a shrub, so you can prune it back to where you want it to be. You don't have to worry about growing a tree by growing the American plum. American persimmon, as you can see from this picture at Virginia Tech, this tree does get humongous. It does get very tall. So keep that in mind. We're also going to talk about its Asian cousin, if you want to call it that, coming up, and that tree is a little bit more manageable. But American persimmon, of course, it's a native, grows in our area in Virginia very readily. As you can see from the height, about 35, big range, as you can see, about 35 to 60 feet tall, and usually about half as wide. We showed that picture earlier about the fall color. Beautiful fall color. You get that orange, kind of maroon thrown in there. The greenish yellow blossoms, usually late spring. It does have separate male and female trees, so keep that in mind when you're planting. you will have to have at least 2 trees. So you have to have a male and you have to have a female tree. The fruit is about 1 to 2 inches in diameter, and it usually matures September through November, or somewhere in there. Uh, very astringent until ripe. So ripe basically means it's getting kind of squishy, very squishy. Completely orange, squishy. If you eat it a little bit too early, then you're going to be, you're going to be a hairy mouth. Very astringent. But nice and baked goods. I haven't used the American persimmon in baked goods, but the Asian persimmon makes a very, very nice Christmas, Thanksgiving type kind of year cake. So very spicy flavor if you've never had a persimmon. They're very nice. I love persimmons. And a few cultivars down there that grow pretty well around here, or very well, I should say. The Asian persimmon, this is the one you probably see in the grocery store if you've seen them before. Korean grocery stores especially have them very readily. There's 2 different types. So you have the one up here. This one is usually, I butcher the cultivar name so badly, but the fuyu, someone probably knows how to pronounce that so much better than I just did. But this one this is the one most, the mouse is not cooperating, but this is the one that's most commonly found in the grocery stores. This one you can eat firm, so it's not soft, and you can eat it kind of like an apple. And there's no seeds in it usually. So you can eat the entire thing except for the leaves, of course, little leafy part, of course. And you can also buy Asian persimmon cultivars that are larger fruited. But this type, you can't eat firm. It's very, very jello-like when it's completely ripe. So more like the American persimmon in that regard. But this is my favorite persimmon right here in the middle picture. I just love eating them, just eating them in general. The Asian persimmon, as you can see, grows a lot smaller. So usually 10 to 12 feet tall. Can be a tree or a large shrub. Flowers about the same time of year as the American persimmon. The fruit's orange again, as we saw in the picture, September through November. Fresh or baked goods. So that very sad butchered name I did right there is the first cultivar listed. You can see there is an astringent one listed, a few astringent ones listed there. But Asian persimmon, I have those in my yard in orange. I love them. The deer, I have very high deer pressure and the deer don't eat these trees. So very nice little tree. I love the Asian persimmon. Sorry if y'all can hear that. My dog is dreaming, so I am presenting this from home right now. So hopefully that is not too distracting. Blackberries and raspberries, pretty good alternatives in your garden. So you have the blackberry, if you're looking in this bottom comparison picture right here, blackberries on the left, raspberries on the right. A little bit other IDs, left, right again, blackberry, raspberry. I threw them both together. They're in the same genus. You're going to have to use some kind of trellis system though. Or you could just let them sprawl too, I guess. That's fine. Depends on your growing style, your design. But they work out pretty good. If you want a fruit that grows well around here, blackberry especially, grows pretty good. So long trailing canes can grow up to 15 feet long. So trellis or allowed to sprawl, whichever you like. The little white rose-like flowers, they're in the rose family, appear in April to May. As you can see, you ever gone to the pick your own farms? Our fruit around here usually comes in the season June through July. Preserves, baked goods, few cultivars listed there. They grow well around here. Primark 45, that's one of the, I'm not getting really deep into primal cane versus floricane growing for blackberries and raspberries. But Primark 45, basically, you grow it like a raspberry. So that's the lazy man's blackberry there. It blooms and produces fruit on what they call primocanes, which means you harvest your fruit, you take out your weed, your hedge whackers, cut it back to the ground in the fall. It grows new shoots in the spring, fruits in the fall instead of the spring, which is novelty. You get your little fruit a little bit later. But you don't have to worry about what is a floricane, what is a primal cane. You don't have to learn all that terminology if you grow that type. But if you want to grow a few of the other types of blackberries, the Chester, which grows nice, Natchez, which is the classic one with the big thorns, you have to know what a floricane is and you have to know what a primal cane is. So primal cane is the current season's growth, which does not produce fruit. It will make fruit the next growing season, the next year. And the canes that did produce fruit, those are the ones you prune back to the ground in the fall. So keeping up with it, pruning is very important with these. So it's not a leave and never go back there maintenance kind of plant. But they grow well. If you want a good fruiting type plant interweaved into your landscape, try these. So black walnut, a lot of folks actually eat these if you haven't tried them before. You might already have some on your property. So black walnut is an option for nut production. Very hard to get in there, has a very distinctive flavor, but it is an option. So this could be your large shade tree. Just don't plant it over the driveway, please. I remember driving along one time a couple of years ago and it didn't hit my windshield, but black walnut put a divot in my truck hood, which is still there. So don't plant it over your top of your car, but it could be your shade tree. 75 to 100 foot tall and wide, so really, really big. Late spring flowers, male and female flowers on the same tree, so you only really need one. The green yellowish husk, which we saw in the picture earlier, much stronger flavor, I should say, than the English walnut. But you can use it in cookies, just like you use English walnut. Cookies, cakes, brownies, and ice cream, you can use it too. Cornelian cherry, one of my favorite plants. It is a dogwood, actually. It is in the dogwoods. It's related to dogwoods. It is a non-native, but it's not invasive as far as I know. You can see the little fruits on there. You can use them like cherries. So you can't eat the fruit off this plant. The seed is pretty big though. The pit is pretty big. So it's a lot of pitting that you'd have to do. And you use these actually just like you would use the pie cherries, just like you would use the tart cherries. So as you can tell, the cobblers, the cherry pies, the jams and jellies is what you're going to be using these for. But this is one of the earliest flowering trees in our area. And as you can see, it's not the same as Cornus florida. It's not the same as our eastern dogwood flower. Very bright yellow flowers on a nice habit tree. The leaves give you that dogwood look though, if you look on the right-hand side picture, the classic dogwood leaf, but totally different flower. And you get fruit you can eat pretty nicely. So large shrub, small tree, 15 and 25 feet tall, about the size of our eastern flowering dogwood. So early spring, just like I mentioned earlier, the drupes 5/8 of an inch, so not really big, but you can use them in syrups and preserves, and just like you would use the sour cherry. And no disease pressure, and I've never seen a deer eat mine. I have one of these trees too. Elderberries, that's native fruit you can grow in your garden. You can see it in flower. You can see the berries here in the right-hand side picture. So it's a suckering shrub, typically grows 5 to 12 feet tall and wide. Flowers are actually tiny lemon-scented flowers. Up here in large, you can see the cymes, the flower clusters we saw in the last picture in June. Black round fruit, late summer. Used jams, jellies, pies, elderberry wine, a lot of country songs about that. So, of course, wine. But it is an option around here, and you will get a lot of fruit if you grow elderberries. So figs are my favorite. I love figs. So you can see the figs do get big, but you can, that is a ripe fig. That is a nice fig in the middle picture. That one is ready to go. Figs, large shrubs, can grow 10 to 20 feet tall and wide. Just keep that in mind when you're designing the landscape. Flowers really aren't very showy at all. It's hard to miss. It's pretty easy to miss them actually. But it's either dark purple. Some fig cultivars are greenish yellow fruits on the outside. Really depends on your cultivar, but you could have fruit production from August through early October off figs. And a few varieties that grow well in our area: brown turkey, classic old variety, Celeste, and Chicago Hardy are the ones I've had the best luck with. I actually have a cultivar currently called Desert King. I believe it's Desert King, yes. And I haven't gotten a fruit off of it yet, but it is supposed to grow the same size. The fig, just imagine this, the fig is supposed to grow as big as a tangerine. So if I ever get one of those, that's going to be awesome. So there's lots of different figs. The plant hardiness zone vet map is very important to keep in mind with figs though. A lot of Louisiana State University, LSU Extension has done a lot of fig research, and as you can imagine, a lot of their cultivars are not hardy here. So keep that in mind when you're researching cultivars, but you can do pretty good here, especially maybe have a little microclimate. That's even better for figs. But no pests, no diseases, deer don't eat them. Fig, fig, fig all day long. Take that to the bank. I love figs. This is the hardy kiwi. If you haven't seen this fruit before, you don't have to peel it. You just pop them like you do grapes. So the inside just looks just like the little kiwi you buy at the grocery store, but these are a lot smaller than the grocery store ones. You can trellis them up just like you do grapes. I have hardy kiwis actually just growing on my front porch actually right now, the porch railings. They do take a while though. It could take 4, 5, 6 years before it really starts producing fruit. But as you can see in this picture, you will get a lot of fruit off a hardy kiwi. You do need male and there are separate male and female plants, so keep that in mind. So you can't just buy one. You have to have a male. But you can have it in a 1:6 ratio, so you could have 1 male plant to 6 female plants. So just have that male maybe tucked in the back corner, out of sight. But you have to have the male plant somewhere. And they're about grape size. That's a very good comparison there. And you harvest the fruit mid to late summer. Mature vines, once they get going, can actually produce up to 50 pounds of fruit a year. So you'll have a ton of kiwis. Arctic Beauty is a good cultivar. Anna is a good cultivar. Meter, actually, the meter name is actually a cultivar of a female plant and a male plant. So you can find both under the meter name. But hardy kiwi, that's nice. That's a nice plant. Hazelnuts, I have a hazelnut too. Hazelnut can grow around here. It's a pretty plant too in general. You have the leaves, you have the little nuts forming, you have the flower itself. That's very unusual, very nice looking flower too. So it's a shrub actually, so you don't have to worry about tree kind of space. 8 to 6 feet tall and wide. The male flowers appear as catkins, and the female flowers appear as the small reddish catkins we saw in the last picture. So about 1/2 inch long nuts, just like the nuts you buy in the store, so the hazelnuts you buy in the store. And if you haven't tried it before, I am happy. I am ready for my hazelnut bush to start making some hazelnuts. Here's the maypop. I kind of teased that one earlier. You have the flower down here on this vine that grows pretty nice. This is the fruit, and if you squeeze that fruit, it makes a popping sound. So that's where the name comes from. And this is, yeah, it's more of a novelty, but I just love it. There's really not much to eat usually if it didn't get pollinated well on the inside, but it's a good curiosity with the grandkids or the kids. So herbaceous vine grows 6 to 8 feet in one growing season. The flowers bloom in the summertime into fall, so a little bit of the entire season. The fruits are on the last pictures. July, mature to a yellowish color in fall. Uh, if it did not get pollinated well, there won't be anything to eat. But if it did get pollinated, you eat it similar to a pomegranate. Or you could make it into jellies. So that's 2 options there. Nanking cherry. This is in the cherry family. So it has the white cherry-like flowers, but it is a shrub, as you can see. And I have a few Nanking cherries on my property too. And it's a beautiful plant. You can see little cherries here. So that is an option. Tons of cherries, as you can see. They don't get as large as the ones you get in the store, but you'll get a lot of them, as you can see from the picture here. So it can grow pretty large, 5 to 10 feet tall and wide, but it is a shrub, so you don't have to have a space for a tree. Early spring, pink buds change to that white flower color. They're about 1/2 inch round fruits. Matures in midsummer. It is a tart cherry, unfortunately, though. So you do have to use it in pies or preserves. And there's actually a white version. So if you imagine those red fruits we saw, completely white. And that version is advertised as a version that birds don't eat that one. Not really unknown why they don't, but maybe because they're white. They look a little weird maybe to them. But if you want a white cherry, that's an option in that cultivar right there. And not a lot of issues. I have seen the deer chomp a little bit on mine, but not too bad. Not as much as my mulberries. I was very surprised about those. The deer eat those up all day long. All the blueberries. So we're only really focusing here on the northern high bush blueberry, but in our area you could grow the southern high bush. You could also grow rabbit eyes very well here. So blueberries. Usually, depending on the kind you buy, 5, 8 feet tall. Rabbit eye will get even bigger than that. The flowers, early, mid, and late season cultivars. So cultivar is very important with blueberries. You need pollination. So you need plants 2 different kinds of cultivars that bloom at the same time. Very important in blueberries. Duke, Patriot, Blue Ray, Blue Crop, Chandler, Elliott, all very old time, good producing cultivars of the northern high bush blueberry. And this is one of the ones that needs the low pH. So this is the one you might have to put that elemental sulfur from the co-op on the soil. So this is the plant that you want to get the soil test for. Find out what your pH is, whether or not you need to lower it or not. So you really need 4.2, low 5s. That's where that's where you get your maximum production from the blueberries. So pawpaw. Pawpaw is a nice little native fruit. Grow in the sun or the shade. You can see the flowers in the top picture here. The maroon flowers, but they look down, so it's kind of hard to see them. They're not real showy. But pawpaw is a nice fruit, fruiting tree, about 15 to 20 feet tall. It is a tree. So the fruits, green fruits, which mature in early autumn to a dark brown color. Really depends on who you ask. Some people say the flower tastes like bananas. Some people say it tastes like banana custard. But just keep in mind it is very, very sweet. So you can get overpowered very easily just eating the pawpaw from the fruit. But it can be made, you can eat it fruit, fresh. You can make it into ice cream, pawpaw ice cream. You get that banana flavored ice cream. You can put it in the pies, you put it in different desserts. I had a pawpaw cake one time, which was pretty good. And the cultivars actually do produce better than the seedling trees, but you can plant seedlings also. Mango, Shenandoah, Rappahannock, Allegheny, good cultivars. Mango is a good cultivar also. So pawpaw, shade, or sun. So you can grow them in either location. Serviceberry looks like a blueberry, but it's actually related more closely to apples and pears and other types of fruit in the rose family. So serviceberry is a nice fruiting plant. It can get cedar apple rust. I have serviceberries and it has gotten cedar apple rust before. But serviceberry, the fruit's small. You can harvest it, eat it just like you would a blueberry. And you get that apple-like flower from a plant that the fruit looks like a little blueberry. So very nice plants, serviceberries in general. So this is a suckering shrub, actually. There are some native eastern serviceberries that are very large trees. This one is actually native to the Rocky Mountains area, this type we're talking about here. But this one does grow here nice too. So it makes really nice fruit. It has been bred to make really good sized fruit. So white flowers, March and April, about blueberry size basically. Eaten fresh, used in jams, jellies, pies. Regent is a really good cultivar, the serviceberry. And I unfortunately lost one of mine. I had 3 serviceberries. I actually lost 2. I only had 1 left. And I found out the hard way that serviceberry, luckily enough, can fruit with only 1. So that does fruit by itself, which is kind of sad. Another little side note, we're actually starting to see these a lot more in parking lot plantings, new developments. So it's kind of being planted as a parking lot tree. So if you ever find one there and it's in full fruiting form, feel free. You can harvest that to your delight. You can definitely eat a serviceberry fruit. Shagbark hickory. This is just one of the most beautiful of the hickories, I think, in our area. Closely related to pecans. Shagbark hickory is the prettiest one, but the pig nut hickory is the one you see most commonly around here. And you can use this just like you would pecans. So it grows very large, 70 to 90 feet tall, 50 to 70 feet wide. So this is your big shade tree, of course. Yellowish, green flowers spring, male and female flowers on the same tree. So you can have just one if you want. Matures in the fall. Great alternative, anything you put walnuts or pecans in. Kind of hard, you have to crack open a lot. Fruit can be smaller, of course, than a walnut or pecan. But it's a great non-native alternative. And as you can see on that bark texture, very nice landscape tree too. We always have to throw strawberries in there. That's always the classic herbaceous layer, of course. But you can get a pink flowering variety of strawberry. And that is a real picture there. There's no touch-up done to that picture. But you can get pink flowering varieties. You can get the white ones, of course, the traditionals. But strawberry, pretty foolproof. You can get some good fruit off a strawberry plant. Most of y'all are probably very familiar with strawberries. You can get June-bearing types or ever-bearing types. June-bearing basically means you get all the fruit, usually just one time of the year. Plants don't always read the books, of course. But you have the ever-bearing types produced all summer. June-bearing's probably a little bit better, but it depends on what you like. Eaten fresh, preserves, baked goods, some of the great cultivars. It's very hard to find the good cultivars, but that pink flowering type is the Toscano. So that's an ever-bearing type if you want the pink variety. And that one's actually becoming very much easier to find in the landscapes now, in the garden centers. Red mulberry is our native mulberry. The white one, which you probably see more often, is our now native. But you can eat these just like blackberries. So red mulberry grows about 35 to 50 feet tall and wide. So that's your big shade tree. Don't plant it over the driveway again. You'll have little stains all over the car. But sweet blackberry-like edible fruits. You can use it in jams, jellies, pies, and wine. So good little native plant here. The white one is the non-native you always hear about, but red mulberry is a native plant. Rugosa rose, rugosa, however you want to pronounce that. You can actually eat the little fruit here on the right-hand side picture. So little rose hips, you can eat those. A very rugged rose. It doesn't get any problems like most roses do. And the leaf just looks a little different, doesn't it? The leaf is very interesting looking. One of the big things about it though, it only flowers usually once a season, but you can get those fruits a little bit later. You can eat them. 4 to 6 feet tall and wide. The flowers usually bloom late May to July, and that's about it. Tomato-shaped hips, about 1 inch diameter, ripen by late summer. And you can use them in jams and jellies and other types of things like that. And very disease tolerant, very disease tolerant rose. And we are right up on time. So that was just a quick selection of different types of fruiting plants. So you can, there's more, of course. And I picked the plants that are really easy to grow. You can grow the apples, you can grow the pears, you can grow the peaches. So they just take a lot more work. So I focused more on the plant fruits that don't take all the work. But let's see what we got going on in the chat. Lots and lots of chats. Let's see. As far as I know, the Ragusa rose is deer tolerant. I'll have to ask my friends at James Mass Montpelier, but they planted a good number of Ragusa roses. Oh, something's actually eaten this one lady's figs at night, so I'm not quite sure what that is. Let's go back up to the top. Everything's being added to the bottom. Okay, let's see. Let's get to the questions first. Oh, the elderberries? Yes, just the berries. So I think I already answered that question. Oh, the syrups. Yeah, you can definitely make the maple syrups. You can make birch syrup. You just have to collect a lot more of the sap, but you can make syrup from a lot of different trees. Definitely, yeah, maple syrup for sure. Lemony lace elderberry? I am not sure, but it probably is edible. I would definitely do some research before I would eat that one though. But yeah, I would definitely look into that one first. But for the animals and the birds, definitely a good option. Let's see some more questions. Chat feature is very jumpy. Oh yeah, yeah. Persimmons are probably everywhere. You probably definitely have a native persimmon in your yard somewhere. In the Shenandoah Valley, we have a question about muscadines and other cultivars that are related to that of grapes. In the Shenandoah Valley, might be kind of iffy. Might be a little cold for them over there, but you can always try them. In zone 7, you're good. You could grow the muscadines definitely here. Hardy kiwi in zone 7A, definitely. I have them growing on my front porch right now. That's what I'm looking at while I'm talking to y'all. So hardy kiwi is the one you want to find. Definitely hardy. Pawpaw can be found at a lot of different nurseries. So we have a question about pawpaws. You can definitely find those here and about. If you want to make a trip down to Near Charlottesville, edible landscaping is a really good option for a lot of these fruits we talked about today. Oh, we have a question about the recording in PowerPoint. Yes, yes. We have to finalize the recording and they have to close caption it, but probably by tomorrow afternoon or Saturday, I'll definitely send out that information. Hazelnuts in Zone 6A? I believe so. I'd have to do more research about that though. Peaches, yeah, peaches are hard to grow around here. They usually have all kinds of issues. Peaches is going to be a hard time. Huh. I wonder why y'all couldn't see the pictures. We never had an issue with that before. Hmm. Yes, we have a question about persimmons. Persimmons, yes, especially the American persimmon. You have to have a male variety and you have to have a female variety. Yes, for sure. The Asian persimmon, though, you can have pollination is not as important. So you could have just one or two trees of whatever variety you like eating off the Asian persimmon. Another question about muscadines. Muscadines, yes, you do need male and female muscadine grapevines. The table grapes, as most people call them, the Concords and the Marses, you don't need that for those types though. Maypop can grow very, very fast, yes. So, depending on where you put it, it could become invasive. But if you keep it in bounds, it's a nice looking plant. Rainier cherries. Your best options for around here are more of the tart cherries. Sweet cherries are very hard to grow here, but you can do it. But they're not quite up there with peaches, but cherries can be hard to grow around here. Self-fertilizing blueberries. That might have been false advertising. I'm not sure about that one. Yeah, blueberries you usually have to fertilize them. So self-fertilizing. Maybe they were talking about pollination. That's probably what they're referring to. And that's probably what you're referring to in the question too, just come to think of it. But yeah, a few cultivars of blueberries are advertised as self-pollinating, but it's usually better if you have two different types that flower at the same time for blueberry pollination. Loquat trees would depend on where you're at. There'd be more of a zone 8 tree, unless you have a microclimate in zone 7. You could grow those in the sun. When I used to live in Georgia, we grew those in full sun. So you could, yeah, you can grow them in sun, no problem, probably up here. Let's see. Oh, raccoons eating the figs. Yeah, it would be tasty, I guess. So all the fruits we talked about today, um, pretty much you're pretty good to go on deer browsing. The mulberries get deer browsed. I've seen the Nanking cherry from our list get deer browsed. But the majority for today, pretty good with deer. Artichokes, yes, you can grow those here. Definitely. Oh, the question about bugs, ants, and squirrels. That's always very hard to do. For ants, you could try diatomaceous earth. The food grade one can work very nicely for ants. Squirrels, that's going to be a hard one. Noisemakers, electric fences. The squirrel wants to be in there, the squirrel's going to be in there. That's just so hard. Keep squirrels away. Oops, I think I skipped some. For the young hardy kiwis, you actually have to wait until they bloom. So you really can't tell until they bloom whether they produce fruit or not, whether they're male or female. So it makes it really hard. Sometimes you have to wait 5 or 6 years to find out if you have a male or female plant. So not something you can look at, just look at the leaves and tell. Cranberries, we're almost a little bit too hot depending on where you're at. If you were in zone 6, go ahead and try cranberries. Probably even parts of zone 7, but it can be a little bit tricky here because it's a little hot. Pawpaw trees, you do not need male and female trees, so you could get away with just one pawpaw tree, definitely. The hazelnuts, I cannot remember off the top of my head whether they need a pollinator or not. I hope not, because I only have one. So I will find out for you in the long run. And I'll try to look that up and get back to y'all. Let's see. Very tall persimmon trees. Being careful. There's pole pickers you could buy. Might not work very well on a persimmon. It's designed for other types of things. But just be real careful. You might only be able to harvest persimmons at where you can reach them. Ladders can become dangerous, so watch out for those. You don't have to remove all the flowers off your strawberries the first year. Yeah, enjoying those the first year, that's fine for strawberries. What could you plant under your pawpaw trees? Probably not much. Pawpaw trees actually produce a lot of shade. Um, I haven't really thought about that around pawpaw trees before. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that one right this second. But in general, pawpaws are beautiful trees, so I just like growing those in general too. Crab apples, yes, you can grow crab apples here. A lot easier to grow than regular apples. And if you want to eat them, Sargent is a good cultivar of crabapple. It's a pretty good size for a crabapple, and it tastes pretty good. If you buy the cultivar Sargent, it tastes good. Crab apples in general can be kind of a toss-up whether they taste gross or not. Yeah, we've talked about the plants in general, so yeah, we really didn't talk about harvesting too much. But feel free to send me any kind of question about harvesting you have. My email is on the screen right now, so um, yeah, any kind of question you have about harvesting, just go ahead and send it my way. Uh, Vitex, the chase tree. Uh, yeah, it's used medicinally, and Vitex grow great around here. I have a humongous one in my front yard. So definitely, yeah, you can. They're beautiful plants. You can definitely grow those here, no problem. And you'd harvest the seed pods when they're fully dry, and then you could. I don't know much about processing them, but you could definitely. Vitex is beautiful. That's one of my favorite trees. So you definitely grow those around here. Any other questions? Yeah, we didn't talk a lot about. We kind of interwove some of the natives in here and there. I didn't really talk about fiddleheads or ginger, major native gingers. But I'll keep my eye out. I'm not quite sure about classes specifically about those. We do have a few more classes coming up in May. We have a lawn class coming up. I'll send it out when I send out the emails about the different classes. But yes, we will definitely keep going on different class topics going forward. Steep hill ideas. They are hard in general, aren't they? Steep hills. Uh, I guess it depends on how steep we're talking about. You could do some kind of trellis system on a steep hill. You see grapes growing on there. You could probably grow the hardy kiwis on some kind of trellis system. You definitely see that kind of thing going. You could even plant the blackberries and let them kind of fall down the hill. That could be an option for a steep hill also. Plants that like wet feet. So are we talking about constantly wet? That'd probably be more of the cranberry that we were talking about earlier. Pawpaws, I've definitely seen them near streams. That could be a good option for wet feet. But a lot of the fruits we talked about today, not very many of those want to be constantly wet. And y'all are definitely welcome. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous now. And feel free if you didn't get, there's lots of questions. If I didn't see it, feel free to email me your question too. You all are very, very welcome. I hope you all enjoyed it. And the presentation, the recording, and the slides, I'll more than likely, depends on how fast they do it at Virginia Tech. The recording has to be closed captioned. So late tomorrow afternoon or Saturday, I will definitely try to get all that information out to y'all. Okay, I hope y'all have a great evening then. And of course, send any kind of questions you have. Go ahead and send them my way if you have more questions. And thanks for attending. Thanks for everybody that attended today.